All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions, your home for all things psycho. I'm your host, Daniel Moeller, and today I'm starting a whole new vein of my Psychonaut videos where I want to start covering more of the esoteric world of things. I like comics, I like a little bit of everything. We've already got like a manifestation coming there on screen. I'm here with really someone who I find amazing, the author of the Tarot-inspired life, Jaymi Elford, the one and only, the Queen of Tarot. Ladies and gentlemen.
Nobody's ever called me Queen of Tarot. I'm like, just go on, please, Daniel. Yeah, no, the little manifestation you saw was my 8-month-old ragdoll kitten, Lily, who my desk is a corner desk. I usually get one on one sid, one on the other.
She's welcome, and if there's anything she wants to say, she can speak too. So
she might. She will most likely try and nom on the microphone here or play with window accoutrements because that's what she does.
We accept all of our four-leggeds here on Psychonaut Sessions.
Yes.
So yeah, not only did you write a great book, and we'll talk about it, we'll get into it a little bit. I love it. I refer to it in my own book. But you've got touch points with multiple other decks, including Starman Tarot, which is one of my wife and I's like our couples deck. We use this as our the deck we use as couples. And so when we picked it up, I mean, I got it because David Bowie, right? Yeah. I was just like, and then I saw, ooh, Jaymi, like, you had a part in that. Including Millennium Thoth Tarot, Triple Goddess Tarot. I mean, so many decks that you've had a part of.
I'm everywhere.
You are the Queen of Tarot, and I'm probably saying Tarot in the way that you wouldn't pronounce Tarot because I'm wonky that way. My pronunciations are always off.
I think everybody's are. I mean, I'm deaf in my right ear, so I don't hear things exactly. And I'm really fun at parties when I hear something and I'm just like, excuse me, did you just say an elephant's butt? What? Yeah, I'm really fun at that. Awesome. You can hire me out. But yeah, no, I've done over 20 books, or little white books, the LWBs as we call it in the tarot world. Again, taroki, however you want to call it, the divination, cartomancy works for me, But yeah, I can't remember when I think it was 2016 or 2015 is when Los Garabeo reached out and said, we need somebody to write, and you came recommended, we wanna, and I went,
nice.
Yeah, I did like the victory dance, and that was the Thoth Tarot, which, or not the Thoth one, but the Arcanum. It was the Arcanum Tarot. Okay. I think that was the first out of the series, and that Renata Lechner did. And so I did that one. I had Barb Moore look over my stuff just because I thought she was the one that recommended me, and apparently she wasn't. It was somebody else. And then the rest is history. But yeah, let's go back to that David Bowie thing, because I want to know, I'll tell you about my involvement, but most of the time I tell people that, because it's a Bowie deck made for fans, and it's also very esoteric as far as David's work that went into it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people are like, the cards are oversized. And usually when you have an oversized deck, in my mind, I'm like, use it for spell work or ritual work, someplace that you can keep it out, kind of like how I've got some cards up here. But you use it for relationship stuff. Like you said, you work with Autumn with it. And that's the interesting thing for me, is because I've never heard somebody use it for relationship questions and stuff.
You say that that people say that the cards are oversized, and to me this is like the perfect size of a tarot card. I don't really like them playing card size. I really like this kind of elongated, because it's not like hefty like the Thoth deck, which is like really that's cumbersome. This is perfect, and it's narrow enough that it can fit almost playing card size in your hand.
Yeah, see, for me, I've got little tiny hands, so I'm the opposite. I'm like, give me the playing card size, give me anything that's an inch thick. I mean, that's a whole episode we can talk on as card stock, because you meet, everybody's got their, I like the thicker 350 GSM. And I'm like, I can't even shuffle that. That's so thick. But people shuffle it like overhand, you know, kind of how you are holding the deck. But I like to riffle sometimes for meditation. And I'm like, give me that the 1 inch thick, you know, when you hold all that together, because that's easier for me to use.
Well, you know, Autumn and I do, you know, we do ceremony together a lot. You know, we teach together, we do, you know, host ceremonies together. And we've always worked with tarot in our ceremonies, but we've never found anything that, like, she has stuff she jives with, I have stuff I jive with, like I have my own personal deck. But we when this came out, we started kind of experimenting with it in our ceremonies, and we just kept, like, together as a couple, we just kept getting drawn to it more and more and more, because yes, it's like flashy and cool and hip. I mean, totally it is, but it does have a lot of the esoteric symbolism that we really appreciate in a deck. A lot of or at least we could see a lot of the associations that we appreciate coming from Kabbalah, which is like one of our huge correspondences that we use. Like, I actually don't understand tarot outside of Kabbalah. Like, it's really hard for me to just go straight into a deck and not incorporate the Tree of Life into it. But so this deck to us felt like it carried all of that symbolism, and it's just so rich in artistic imagery. And we kept over and over and over again pulling cards that kept drawing us back to relationship issues with that
deck.
That's
awesome.
And so we finally, like, I remember we did a ceremony on our anniversary where we just decided this is our deck to work with. And so whenever we have any relationship issues that we need clarity on, we always, our anniversary is coming up in the next weekend, we always work with it on our anniversary. And we usually draw a card that is like our card for the year from this deck, and we put it on this altar in our bedroom that's like our marriage altar.
Aww.
And so
I love that.
Yeah, it just works for us. It just, you know, it's kind of cool that it's also like the hip new deck, or I think it's the hip new. I think all the kids are into it. But
I found that mostly the Bowie collectors are, you know, using it, and a lot of the tarot community, at least the ones that I'm a part of, are like, this is too much information for me and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, what's funny about that deck is that I've never been a true Bowie fan, and sacrilegious, right? Usually how it works with me being a staff writer with Los Garbeos, that sometimes they present like, here's a list of things we have for the year, pick one or two off of this. But sometimes they say, okay, we know kind of your perspective on things, kind of like how you work. And they ask me directly, we want you to work on this. Do you have the time? And then, you know, then I'll say yes or no. But with the Bowie one, they were like, we want you on this. We need you because we want you to work with David and coach and counsel him. And we want your English expertise. And I came up with all the keywords. So I did write bits and parts of the booklet, but not the main descriptions that came from David's wife. And I did get to edit a little bit over that. But most of the time, they're like, whatever is in there goes. And so I ended up spending a lot of time with Bowie, because I'm like, well, this is a David Bowie deck. Other than a few songs, I do like his more poppy stuff, which I know he didn't like much.
Right,
and I keep telling, you know, his spirit, I'm like, sorry, you know, but I was listening to his music over and over and over, just trying to get the vibe, get the impressions of what he was trying to say. And coincidentally, that year that I was working on it, the Brooklyn Art Museum had an exhibition on Bowie. Like, they had a lot of his dress, a lot of his clothes, art and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And while I couldn't take any pictures, they allowed me to use my notes. And he was a seeker. He was an esoteric, spiritual seeker.
Yeah.
I mean, his lawyers didn't want a lot of the Bowie estate, and the lawyers didn't want a lot of Bowie in the deck. They were like, no. Even though Bowie, had he lived, probably would have written and added more of his esoteric knowledge into that deck. So I was able to kind of get glimpses, like, He had tiny 35 millimeter slides where he sketched his own tarot on at one point. And, you know, he said that if he was into any religion, Buddhism was probably the closest thing he could find out there. He would do stuff like with Laurie Anderson, who was a experimental musician as well. They would try and do sync dreams, like, I'm gonna go to sleep now, you go to sleep, let's see if we can meet somewhere. And then they would draw what they saw, or they project images towards one another and try and draw and see if they synced up. So he did a lot of that stuff. He even used the cut up deck, which is like a bunch of random sayings and stuff to try and get creative whims and ideas for his songs and music. And so he was a seeker.
Yep.
And we tried to get some Bowie stories, into this deck, because David had a lot. He was telling me some stuff in emails. I'm like, put this in the deck. But then again, the legal stuff, when you become a famous person, or like your fandom, there's that legal aspect. And the lawyers will only allow, so much of something into that thing. Like right now, there's a company, I believe it's Image, and they are the ones doing like the Nightmare Before Christmas deck, all the Disney stuff, the Hocus Pocus. And while they are collector's decks, truly collector's decks, because they do this hybrid where they can only buy so many images. Like all the majors are illustrated.
Right.
But a lot of the minors will not have pictures on it. Like I bought the Supernatural deck because I am a fan, but I wanted a Supernatural deck that I could read with, and having a mix of the Marseille style pips or playing card pips with images, it does something to your brain when you're trying to work with the imagery and the cards, where you're like, I gotta switch modalities and stuff. And so I'm not their audience, which is sad, but I know a lot of people keep feeding the company back saying more images. So I'm hoping that in the future they'll be able to kind of illustrate stuff a little bit better for those of us that do like that. But yeah, the Starman deck, that was wild to work on. I had no idea in my entire life that I would do something like that, provide the keywords, create the spreads for it, kind of write the introduction material on that. I mean, that was like a weird, cool dream come true in a way.
Right. Yeah.
And it kind of made me a Bowie fan working on it.
Yeah, I could feel your influence through it, most definitely. I could, tell I could see where you came in. And yeah, I mean, if outside of his like greatest hits, I mean, if you're an avid Bowie fan, you can see his esoteric leanings all through his music. And it's not like loosey-goosey stuff. Like if you can see it very heavy. And just well done. Thank you.
Well, I mean, and the other deck that I think that I've done is that has more esotericism. I don't know if you have the Heaven and Earth Tarot.
No, I don't.
So that one is an interesting one. That Jack Sephiroth, who was a Chinese illustrator, designed and created that deck, and I got picked. They wanted me to actually write this one because of my unique perspective on things. And at first I had a hard time getting into it because it's very Christian influenced. Like you look at the Magician, and the Magician card looks like Jesus.
Yeah.
And then Mary looks like, the High Priestess is Mary. And I went, oh God, how am I going to do this? I mean, I know it's the Heaven and Earth Tarot, and I get, why it's got some of that influences. And they chose me for this, and I went, I need to make peace with this. I just taught a class on making peace with cards you don't like. And so how I entered that is I decided to turn it into more of a Kabbalistic deck. And I used my knowledge and study of Kabbalah, both the Q and the K versions, like using, I think, references from your book as well, your shamanic Kabbalah, and all the other books I had, plus my own knowledge, because it's one of those things where, and you might agree with this, because you've written a book on it, I haven't, but every time I dip my toe into it, I think I get it. And I really don't. I start reading, I'm like, I get this. And then you try and apply it and you realize, no, I don't get this. And it's just this cool spiral where you spiral up and down as you go deeper and learn it. But I added journal questions to that deck related to the Kabbalah to try and get people to engage with the material in that deck. Yeah, and then Jack's imagery is just, amazing, brilliant.
I'm looking at some of the examples, beautifully rendered. But the Knight of Swords even look like Crusaders almost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
but
that Hanged Man is pretty splendid. That's my life path card.
Gotcha. That's my hidden. I'm an Empress World, but the Hanged Man being another 3 component, it's all in there. So yeah, which again, I mean, I don't really tend to think numerology as esoteric, even though it could be to some people, but numerology is fascinating, especially when you apply it to tarot and cycles and like the DNA spirals and code that I see in tarot as well.
So let's scale this back a little bit for people that may not, because I think some of my audience gets this stuff, but other members might be like, what? Let's throw this back to good. little Jaymi. All right.
Little Jaymi. Okay.
Yeah. And when like you started having any kind of esoteric leanings or pagan leanings, and like what eventually led you into tarot,
doing what I'm doing now.
And and then like, so in that, like in those early days, like where you came from and how you got to that point, like if you could provide kind of your definition of tarot and on top of that.
Yeah. So let's see here. Little Jaymi read at an early age. I was reading adult books by 3rd grade, like big fat, like I was 80. I was born in 74, so 84 was the year that Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Goonies, all those big, awesome Gen X, blockbuster films came out. Yep. And I remember, everybody getting the little thin books, but I went to the adult sections, and I had, like Gremlins and Ghostbusters and the big books written for the adults. So I got all those bad adult words in me, even though I wasn't supposed to use them, But so I mean, just reading and wanting thirst for knowledge at an early age definitely pushed me in that direction. Secondly, I grew up in Colorado, and so the esoteric stuff was always kind of small and cramped back then because it was kind of taboo. I mean, like I had seen the esoteric shelves, but at that point in my life, young Jaymi wasn't ready for that stuff yet. She wanted the fiction, in a way I was kind of gravitating towards Stephen King and horror, which is funny because my first horror movie, Poltergeist, scared the shit out of me. And I was like yelling at my family for watching this. Why are you making me watch it? It was a PG rated film at the time. And I was just scared shitless, having all my stuffed animals built around me in case something tried to come up and grab me. They'd have to go through like 2 layers of animals before getting me. And by that time,
that movie
I would
scared
run
the
away.
Piss out of me, man.
Yeah, it was oh my God, horrifying. It was terrifying for us at that age. But I was still, that also got me into that horror kick of, toe dipping, watching like Elm Street out of the corner of my eye upstairs when I was supposed to be in bed, but Dad was watching it on HBO or whatever, going, oh, scary part. Oh, wait, that's not bad, So that also influenced, I think, because the occult and kind of the horror aspect, what we're afraid of, and trying to, again, that knowledge ties. But I also started going to summer camps. And summer camps did 2 things for me. Number one, it got me out of being bullied by people in my school districts, because Colorado, I mean, some of us refer to it as the hate state. I mean, if you're not into sports, if you're not into whatever the status quo, the Promise Keepers were Colorado Springs. I don't know if they're still there anymore, but we had Colorado Springs, which was heavily Christian Catholic influenced, all that stuff. And, the Broncos are like saints, if you weren't into basketball or football, you were just, hazed and all that stuff.
Yep.
But summer camp got me out. And the camp that I went to was called Geneva Glen. And Geneva Glen they have the highest retention of teenagers because of the way they structure this. When I went, the first 2, they were set up in 2-week increments. So you had enough for that 2-month span for anybody to go. The first 2 weeks were talking about indigenous people. Back then it was called American Indian heritage. So you had Indian heritage, and each dorms were boys, cabins were girls, had their own tribe, had their own persona where they learned about what that group was, what they ate, what they did, cultural appreciation. And at the end of it, we put together a powwow, which every tribe or a couple of groups would come together and they'd do a dance, a skit, or something. And the next months were all about the Knights of the Round Table. So first 2 weeks were focused on Merlin and Merlin's Mask, and there was a play. And then the second 2 weeks were literally the Knights of the Round Table, where teens had, you could vote for King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and then for the guys, they would literally have a sword in a stone. Of course, it was a person underneath holding it, but they'd call out the name of the person who would try and, pull the sword. And if the one that pulled it became the king, and then somebody would whisper in their ear who was their Guinevere. So they made a whole pomp and circumstance. Again, the community would come together and do a pageant at the end. But that influenced hardcore most of me today, because it taught me I could be liked outside of school. Before then, I was just, hazed, kind of mentally abused by people, still dealing with repercussions on that.
Yep.
And I mean, it's hard. I can't imagine, especially as we're quote unquote coming out of a pandemic, although if you ask me, we're still in it. But as we're doing this, I can't imagine having to be a teen or a child and having, using Zoom, going to school, but dealing with abuse and the bullying and all that stuff. I'm like, I thought I had it bad in the 80s and 90s. Kids, if you're listening, I feel I'm there with you. You're doing good. Hang in there. It does get better. It does get better. Sometimes you can't see it, but it does get better.
Right.
So it taught me that I had friends. And then it also kind of implanted this love for nature that I have. Got me started out on, mythology, folklore around King Arthur and all that, as well as the indigenous peoples, cultures and influence and spirituality. And I started with crystals, pretty rocks, quartz crystals, going to crystal stores because we had them. No books, on that yet, or, other things. But then when I was 13, I walked into I think either Walden Books or B. Dalton. Those don't exist anymore.
I miss those stores so much, man. They were the best.
Mall rats. Yeah. The mall rats day in the 80s and 90s, you go in and those were the bookstores. And I stumbled across tarot. I stumbled across a bunch of decks and I had no idea what they were. And I was like, ooh, these are cool. They're like playing cards, but they have pictures on every card. What is up with that, right? So I saved all my money, probably from babysitting or something. And I remember, I think I was 13 and I bought US Games Edition Tarot of the Witches, which I had no idea was in the James Bond flick. And I had no idea. I just thought the images were cool. And then I went home, opened them up, had to get a deck of playing cards to teach myself how to riffle shuffle. And then I started reading the little booklet that came with it. And at the time, those booklets only had keywords for what we call upright, which is if you look at the picture, it looks fine. And then reverse it, if you turn it upside down, it had a whole nother set of meanings. And I went, what the fuck? You mean I got to memorize all this shit? I didn't want to memorize any of that. I was just like, it's like multiplication tables. I was like, this is like school. Fuck this. I don't want to do with this.
Right.
And then I set it aside and I would do pictures, I would do readings, but I wouldn't read them because I didn't understand the Celtic cross. And at that point, because that was the only spread in any book, I was like, I don't want to do 10 cards. Nobody ever taught me that you could just use one card to begin with, or 2 or 3. And that's, the max that anybody ever say at the beginning, just start small. But these books back then went, let's do these grand, huge, esoteric things when, you're 13 at that time.
It's very daunting. It totally sways you away from it at first. At least it did me too. It was very similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this cool, powerful thing. I mean, obviously, I've got all this tarot stuff and decks and tiles and stuff sitting on these shelves behind me. But, even though I was reading an adult level, there's something in that 13-year-old mind that you're still like, I don't get this yet. You need to learn more. And so I stepped away for a bit and I learned I Ching because that was a book. You can just read the book as you flip the coins, and then poof, you got your divination message.
Right.
But then I came back to tarot in my high school and college levels and found better decks with bigger books that explained things a little bit more. And then I kind of started dipping my toe back into it. And then paganism and magic and witchcraft kind of came later when I moved. And this was all in Colorado. And then I moved up to where I'm living now, Portland, Oregon, in the Pac Northwest. And I found like places that were teaching basics of magic. But that came secondary to like the love of wanting to play with the cards. My first esoteric book was Tarot Spells by Janaya Renee, because I'm like, well, I love the cards. Here's a book that tells me spell work with the cards. So that was, I mean, it's always kind of been tarot. As my book says, my life, I taught myself crochet to make tarot deck bags, because a lot of stuff doesn't come with bags or nice tuck boxes. Learn to sew, you know, it's just, it was just one of those things where everything added up to that coming back to the deck and just enjoying collecting. At the time I was a bigger collector than I am now, but wanting to use the decks more and more. I mean, even back then people were like, you can only read for others, not yourself. Or if you read for yourself, you can only do it once a day. And I'm like, this is bullshit. I want to play with the cards. Why do you buy something that costs, you know, like today's day and age, $60 to $100 and use it once a day?
Yeah.
No. I mean, we don't do that with the Xbox or the video games. You know, we don't do that with books. And it just, so I set out with the book years and years ago. I was like, I want to incorporate this in many ways into my life, my practice, you know, my pagan practice, my daily writing practice. And the book is the culmination of all of that experimentation combined with all the classes that I started teaching. Because I attended my first conference, the Bay Area Tarot Symposium, aka BATS, many, many moons ago. And Thalassa, the creator of it, this, you know, after that first year was like, send me a proposal. And I did one for tarot and creative writing, and she got me in. And that took me in a whole other direction where, again, when you're bullied, you're like, I don't want to teach. I don't want to deal with people. And here I was teaching people tarot going, I fucking suck at this. I don't like people. I don't want to teach people to do anything. Coming from a tech writing background or a QA thing, I'm just like, I don't want to do this, but apparently I'm good at it and I actually enjoy it. And I love seeing what people do with either the material in the book or the material in the deck and how they use, you know, like the tools that I've helped, you know, breathe life into. So that's kind of my background.
I have a kind of a question to spawn off of that. And you kind of cover this a little bit in your book. But I kind of want to talk through it. Like the difference between the myth and history of tarot, because when I first got into it, I was really steeped in the lore and not the actual history, and was really fascinated that this is really this ancient system that came all the way from thrice great Hermes, passed down from the Egyptians and possibly even Atlantis, and who knows, even fucking aliens. And
it always goes back to aliens, right? It's like the one guy says, because aliens.
Of course. That's a whole other topic. We can get into that later. But no, I mean, in my younger years, I was and then when I found out the kind of mundane history, I was just like, it was like slightly disappointed.
And I love your body language when you do that too, because that's something, you know, I look at when I do tarot readings. It's, you know, like, oh, I got this card. I did this once where I thought it was the sun and it was actually the moon, and my body dropped. And it's because, I got to deal with all that shit that the moon represents. But yeah, I mean, so I love tarot myths and in some ways tarot history. Yes, it might seem boring, but it's still kind of interesting and fun to learn.
It is.
Like tarot myths, we got a myth for everything in the cards. Like, you can't buy your own deck. Your first deck has to be given to you. And I
remember being told that.
Yeah. You know, number one, it's like we talk about this now. I'm like, that's fucking gatekeeping, you know. But back then, think about it. Back in the 60s, the 50s, you know, there was a huge gap in our history where, you know, like I'm jumping back and forth, but 1910, was when they made, mass production deck, the Rider-Waite Smith, or the Smith weight deck, as we like to call it now. That came out. They had the printing, things. And then during World War I, that area got bombed. And so they lost a lot of that stuff. So there's a huge gap from like maybe 1920, 25, to 50s, where tarot kind of really, really went underground. But that myth of you have to buy your own, and somebody else has to buy it for you, I felt like it's a gatekeeping on two levels. Number one, they wanted to make sure you were serious. Are you going to, dignify and sanctify this esoteric, device that was handed down from Atlantis or the Egyptians or, etc. And number two, it kept the sources hidden because they didn't want anybody knowing where to get these decks, because these people wanted to keep that supply chain to themselves. I think it's just bizarre. So that was a huge one. I was also told by my friend after I got my first true tarot that I was going to learn from, the Handel deck, which talk about esotericism. It had I Ching in it, runes, a bunch of other stuff thrown in, and that's why I got it, because I'm like, oh, it connects me back to the I Ching, which I've kind of read. And she was like, you got to have it wrapped in purple or black silk. So here I am going to Joann's and finding purple silk, cutting off, a little bit and then wrapping it up. Or the myth that, to break it in or something, you got to sleep with it. Yes, friends, I have put various tarot decks under my pillow to become more in sync with it. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You can, but it's not going to do what you think it's going to, what they claim it'll do, impart the wisdom. But there's also like the myths, like you said, where it came from. Atlantis. Anthropologists and archaeologists and just about and historians have tried to find where that mythical island that Plato describes in all of his books, where it came from, and there's no such place. There is no such way that island could have been formed or made. Sorry, folks. I do wish Atlantis in like the sense that SG-1 exists,
Yeah, right on.
Stargate was another favorite of mine, and I've used it in everything from, like when the Mayans, the 2012 stuff, I was like, Stargate, SG-1 will save us, for friends that were really worried about all that stuff. I was just
we
like,
just
we'll wait for
started
SG-1
actually for the first time ever. My wife and I just started it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We're excited. Yeah. We're liking it so far.
I've watched it twice now, and I know that we'll put it on as well, just because, I was an English major in college. However, I found anthropology because I needed a sociology thing. I'm like, let's do this cultural anthropology class. And that blew my mind, and that became my minor. So I have this love of culture, and more specifically, why do we believe the things we do and then do what we do with it, aka why I was bullied. Why do people fear the unknown, the esoteric, the weirdness, so that it all blends together. But yeah, so these myths, even the Romany myth, the myth that they started it, and that is, I'm sorry, that is a myth. I know TikTokers, I know Tarot Talk, talking to you folks, read the material. Right. There is nothing in the history that suggests that they used and created tarot decks.
Right.
Because of the historical facts. They may have used they have their own systems. That I agree with. But we don't have the proof. And a lot of Romany that are on TikTok will say it wasn't our creation. So again, I've got books if anybody wants that, or if you want to yell at me, you can. But the history we have doesn't support that.
Yeah, so it started as
still a myth.
Playing cards in Italy, right?
Yes, I go further back though.
Okay.
Because we have to honor the form it came from. Paper. Paper came from China.
Yep.
So playing cards are
you actually kind mentioned that in your book.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Don Leon's book, like this big old fat book on the history of tarot. We go back to paper, and they were using playing cards. And I did a deck a couple of years ago called the Panda Tarot for Lo Scarabeo. Sometimes I'll ask if they have do you have a theme or a way you want me to write this in mind? And I remember my editor going, it's a deck. with pandas on it. So I went, great. So I kind of created a fun thing where it's like, pandas are the ones that really discovered tarot, because paper comes from China. And back then, pandas needed, they eat bamboo, and bamboo is what they used for paper. So they would, chew on the paper, make it mushy. I'm sure some of that fell out of their mouths, because I haven't seen pandas use, implements or, paper towels or, napkins. So that would fall on the ground, right? And then they'd step on it, and that would, turn it into paper. It would dry, and then people would find it and go, look, panda feet. Ooh, what does this mean in my life? So, pandas are, if we want to go back to it, because pandas. But, I have a whole post on my website about this. It's hilarious. And my friend Benabel Wynn was like, you should have pushed this harder. And I'm like, yeah. And, but yeah, so paper came from China. And then all the different trade routes, they would buy paper or trade for it. And then, Italy, mostly it came from Italy, where the rich folk would hire artists who would design tarot decks, playing games. Which is funny because, there are people out there like, tarot is an esoteric thing only used for the wisest of the anniversary months. We only use just a jokey, use your stuff as a reference. We only use the Stargate or the Starman deck when we're together. There are people that believe that they pull the silk back, and once a year they take this enlightened object out, 78 pieces of paper with pretty pictures on it, and do this. But tarot was a game.
Yeah.
Divination, the idea that people divine because we want to know things or get in deeper touch or see the future has always been there with us. We've always had the sense of wanting to know. And games kind of help, bring that, where we turn like divination into a game. Here's how you do this. Nursery rhymes. The ravens. How many ravens do you see? Can be an oracular thing.
I was going to ask how you reconcile that, because it took me a while to reconcile the fact that it comes from such a mundane background, but yet we use it so strongly as an esoteric tool for divination and spiritual development.
I do both, I guess. I always say that I've always played with the cards, because play is discovery. When you think about it, we have games that teach us how to run, or we have games like basketball, going back to that sport thing, that teaches us how to balance a ball, between our left and right sides. Tarot and learning the cards, especially in my modality, is, you play with them, you get to know them, you understand them, and it's okay to honor your stuff. Back in the day, we had Mary Kay Greer, we had Rachel Pollack, and I'd read their books, and then they'd say something about tarot, but my gut was saying something different. And my gut's wrong. My gut's always wrong, because we've got Mary Kay fucking Greer and Rachel Pollack are, queens of tarot, and they are saying that this card means this. And I wish I hadn't done that, because, again, reading is an art form. Yes, we can have all the esoteric keys in front of us. I can give, the most boring reading and just define the cards. But the art form is weaved into story. It's weaved into play. It's weaved into what information the client or the querent gives. I use the term client or sitter these days, just because querent to me is a little outdated, in what we do. And so for me, it's both. It is my esoteric path. It is my book. But it's also the thing that I love most and, play with. You can still play Tarot-key. You can find those things online. I'm really interested in tarot and role-playing games. Like, I've always wanted to do a D&D tarot character, have a deck, and literally shuffle that. And the spell that came out of that was what I would cast. And that's awesome. That's another cool way of using the cards, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm a Critical Role fan, and they just released Oracle from Mollymock, and I haven't gotten it because I didn't jump on it right away because I didn't even know that it was being released. So I hope, please make another batch because I want it. But yeah, it all blends together. People have their fandoms and they want, again, tarot decks, going back to Image, or some of the other Inside Editions, decks. And esotericism is about seeking with, to me, it's about going deeper, finding out answers to, in a way, cultural anthropology. Why do we exist? Where did we come from? Why do I think this way? Why does Daniel think, his way? Why does he like my stuff so much? It's, a thing. And tarot is that tool that helps us get in touch with, the source of all, either God, it could be your God, it could be your goddess, it can be whatever, it could be our deeper spirit. And as well as it also reflects things that are going on in us. Like when you look at a card you don't like, that tells you something about yourself.
Right.
Like, I had an issue with the handle Queen of Wands, and that was Kali. They used the Hindu system in their court cards. And my 10-year-old brain, when I saw that, I just saw an image I didn't like. I was like, this deck would be perfect if, and a lot of us do that. This deck would be perfect if only these 5 cards weren't in here.
Right.
And later on, I went back to that deck and I looked at that image. And this is after I taken a lot of folklore classes, the anthropology stuff, graduated from college. In my 30s, I looked at it and I said, oh, well, look at that. I really looked really close to the image and I saw, that the myth of Kali having sex with her brother. And I was like, oh, that's why I got triggered, right?
Yeah.
Even more, fast forward a couple years ago, I learned that I'm asexual, meaning I don't like penetration. I'll hug, I'll kiss, I'll snuggle. I love a good snuggle. I love it, but I don't like the act of penetration.
Right.
And in a weird way, that card all those years ago when I was a teen was kind of telling me something that I didn't have I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have that experience yet.
That subconscious key, entering in and triggering something so you could start recognizing that part of yourself and embracing that part of yourself. That's awesome. Love it. And
that's the power that tarot, that these 78 pieces of paper with images on it, that was a game and then came out, people started applying and hanging everything onto it. Like, Kabbalah was hung on it. Numerology is hung on it. Astrology is hung on it. Alchemy is hung on it. And some people are like, that's too much. But again, it's that source of play. If you like things like Kabbalah and you like things like tarot, how can you connect them together?
Yep. Yeah. I was, when you were, before you even brought up Critical Role, that's where I was going in my brain was it's like role playing, and anybody who's into role playing games, that it could be so much more than we're just sitting down and just playing a game. Whatever it is, this community thing. It is that's where I learned problem solving and really enlivening my creativity. And that's why I do love your book. Since you asked, why does Daniel like my work so much? The reason why I do is because I have struggled with many books out there on tarot that just become the dictionary of meanings, and you don't allow that. You don't just lay out and say, okay, here's every card and this is what it means, and then boom. You construct a format for people to begin a relationship with the cards, and you help kind of guide that relationship so each person can become their own master at it, which is just, I think some people might be like, no, just tell me what it means. But if you really want to do tarot, I think in a very effective way, you have to become your own master, and you got to find a way to have your own. Anyway, you kind of lay it all out really well, and you have a really nice template set up for, whenever I know someone who doesn't really have much experience with tarot and they're interested in reading something, Jaymi Elford. Read her book because it helps.
There's 2 types of people. Those, like you said, that I just want to know the cards. And that's fine. I refer them to my good friend, one of my family members, Melissa Sanova. Her book and Tarot Inspired Life go really well together. She will tell you the cards and kind of have some cussing in there for you. She'll tell you like it is.
Nice.
But there's also the people that are like, I want to play. I'm just going to dive right in. And that's where my book comes in. That's where I help you look at the patterns and see things, or, make the games, or tell you, hey, I've gotten a lot of writers to get decks. They won't read like esoteric fortunes or do the spreads. They'll use that as a creative whack pack. Like the actual deck that is a creative whack pack that's out there.
That's what I wanted to touch upon is like, so your whole chapter of inspiring the muse is like that. Like, so to me, it like that's one of the ways in which I use tarot, and you were hitting on it, and you also gave me some ideas, because it's to kind of go back to like William Blake and the idea of imagination being that portal into the other realms. Like whenever I'm writing as a creator or I'm drawing, that's like that imaginative essence that I like to tap into. And tarot is such an amazing tool to be able to do that, like to help kind of tap into a particular character and trying to figure out what are the next steps this character is going to take. Oh fuck! I've got 78 options I can like roll through, and so
it's so much fun because I will do this. And I've last Saturday I taught a class at a library. The one that talks about I call it Tarot for the Curious. A lot of the chapter names in the book came from the classes that I've taught. So Tarot for the Curious is my free class that I teach people who are curious about tarot. And what I do in that class is I talk about the myths, I talk about the history, I give them the structure of it, how it's broken down, why it's different than an oracle deck. And then I talk about, for those that are just want a reading, I give them 5 big tips on how to get a good reading, get the most out of a tarot reading. Do research type of thing. And then for those that have a deck or want to play with their decks, I give them like some suggestions, a 3-card draw type stuff on how they can get into it. But with inspiring the muse, that was the number one thing. I mean, like you and I are both writers, fiction writers, you draw. I don't. I do stick figures. Like that creativity, when you are an artist or a creative, you want to use it in, at least for me in tarot, I'm like, how can I do this as a writing tool? How, tarot is a writing buddy. I've told people that if I were lost on an island all by myself with no help, what would you want? What's that one item you want? A tarot deck, a plastic one. They do make plastic decks because it would be waterproof and it would still be there. But it would be my buddy. I could do readings. I could do a reading on when the fuck will I get off this island. I can make stories up with it. I've got 78 friends, It's not as practical as a hammer, I know. And, in the worst circumstance, if there's no wood, I'd probably have to burn it. But, it's just one of those things. It has become my life, and you will never find me without one, whether it's digital or, print. But yeah, it is a great resource. You can do readings on how do I get out of this funk, the writer's block, the artist block. You can redraw, like for you, if you need inspiration, just pull a card and you start drawing it, right? And then your brain, because you're connecting with your muses, the muse will be like, oh, you're drawing. Here's an idea. And then you're like, oh, brilliant. Here's the next, Psychonauts issue right there. And it all came from priming the pump. And that's what I see tarot is kind of doing for us as creatives, is helps prime the pump for the work that, we're meant to do on this earth, which is creation or, imagination.
Yeah. I you lay this out in the book as well, but I really do use it whenever, like when I construct stories, like when I'm writing, I have often no idea how the end is going to be, and I always end up setting myself up for like all these scenarios, and that's how I get out of it is I start throwing tarot and like showing different pathways that I can take it. And I may not take every idea, but it gets everything flowing, and it helps me like roll into the right direction. So
it does.
Do you feel like that there is some type of like archetypal spiritual guidance, like intelligence that's coming through the imagery of the tarot, or do you just see it as like a fun, playful thing? Like where do you feel in terms of its identification spiritually, I guess?
To me, it can be both. It can be both, because the power comes through us. It's what we believe in. I've had skeptics read tarot for themselves. When they come sit down, they're like, prove me wrong, psychic, tell me what I'm thinking. And I flip tables on them. I'm like, how about this? Would you be willing to be an experiment with me? And they're like, sure, whatever, yeah. So I lay the cards down and I say, tell me what you see. And I let them talk. And then you could just see the shit works, come right off of them. But, and this is why I don't like a lot of what the big religions are saying, because they're saying this is the devil's book, the devil's Uno, stuff like that. And it's like, it really comes from within. It is just a tool, just like the cross is a tool, just like, going to a church, you put on that church atmosphere when you're with the deck. If you're in reverence with the deck, you'll go deep. You'll have that space, the sacred space that you set up. And to me, sacredness is like just, entering something with a little bit more of an intent. And that intent can be knowledge. The intent could be, I need to feel something, a connection to something greater than myself. It can be, I'm going in with the intent of getting an idea for writing or for art. It really is the person. So I see it as both. There are days where I just kind of like, jokingly, well, let's see what I should eat today, and come out with like, oh shit, okay, I need to, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, bow down to the cards. There are times where like my decks tell me when they want to retire, right? I mean, everybody out there is going, what the fuck? Decks want to retire? And I'm like, yeah, they do. There are some times where I pick up a deck and I'm like, okay, I've used to over, this month of Halloween, I've been doing all these, party readings because I was doing that. I was at a haunted house for a month, and I felt the deck that I was using for that was like, I'm done. Please, when we're done with this, can I go to sleep? And then like I bring a water bottle. Yeah, I know this one doesn't have a lid on, but I get these airtight water bottles, and somehow the water spills out and half of the deck gets ruined.
Wow.
They tell me when they want to retire by getting water on. And so there's both. There is this entity. We do create entities, just by, giving them a soul. Animals have souls in them. My car has an entity, and while that car's body is good and still going, I know within the next 5 years I might need a new, car. And the entity, for the first time ever, I looked at the entity and I said, do you want to come with me to a new body, or do you want to move on to the next person? And it said, no, I want to stay. So now we have to talk about bodies. I've looked at small 2-door cars. I'm like, what about this? Hell no. Okay. And I'm like, well, this one, they're like, nope. Or they point out something. I'm like, no, I don't want a 4-door. I know you want to be bigger, maybe. But, so it's interesting that, everything, again, goes back to myth. We think and we create and we do. And what we believe in tries to make sense of, the flailing that we do every day right now. And especially right now, like tarot's gotten huge again, thanks to, well, I say thanks lightly here, to the pandemic, where, we're all, me and my friends were like, we've got CPTSD from the pandemic, from having all of our lives uprooted, from wearing masks, from, the sickness, from losing people that we love and are connected to. And there are psychologists or spiritual, guidance counselors. Everybody who deals with other people and mental health are tired and burnt out. And people come to either tarot readers or the decks themselves to kind of start relieving some of that pressure. They look at the deck, and they could be esoteric in it, but they look at it as, this quick fix tool, which it's not quick fix, but it gives them something to start looking at and reflecting and then dealing with, the things that bubble up day to day.
I didn't realize that, because I'm not tapped into the esoteric community at all online, but I didn't realize it was getting huge again.
Yeah, a lot of Variety and some of the other like bigger cosmopolitan magazines are always pushing out articles on tarot. Like, here's these great beginner decks, or here's the books you want to look at.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just again, for mass market deck, $20-$30, you can get get this. And we've moved away from the esoteric in a way I've seen. It's like the 80s and 90s, we were into all this esoteric stuff, right? The tarot was just, again, it was getting put into everything. And somewhere in the 90s and 2000s, we started tapping into psychology and going deeper, and how can we look at it as a tool to fix our brains or where we're at. So there's been this change for it. But again, it's now kind of doing both. It's being able to hold the esotericisms. It's being able to, hold that symbolism, hold the rituals of various belief patterns, as well as still be that mental health or journaling or supportive tool that many of us are like, I'd rather do, I kind of don't like fortune telling readings, I'd rather go deeper, and how can we fix our psyches or deal with the now, that's bugging us.
I don't think I've ever done a fortune telling style reading. Whenever I've worked with people, it's always this like very deep session, and oftentimes really just even working with one card to just like really dive into the particular issue and whatnot. But I always use it in ceremony. The tarot's always been a part of my shamanic altar that I've used in my tradition, and it's actually in the tradition I was trained in Peru. They use it frequently.
That's so cool.
Yeah, as part of like I wouldn't say indigenous practices, because the practices have formed, or they've evolved over time.
Yeah,
it got this syncretic nature with like Catholic iconography and stuff like that. But like tarot's huge thing there. It's crazy.
And that's amazing. I mean, like, people, talk about cultural appropriation, talk about cultural appreciation. And like, I mean, I know I've read your books and a while ago. So, I'll have you correct me, but it's like you're talking about the Peruvian shamanic stuff that has been passed down lineage, thousands, 10,000s of years. But then Catholicism and Christianity moves in, and they're forced to adopt stuff while still kind of hiding and changing.
Yeah.
And people forget that, the Smith-Waite deck, the Rider-Waite Smith, that first one that, came out and had all the pretty pictures on it, has Christian symbolism in it. It has a lot of Catholic, it has a lot of Christian, because Western mystery schools were building off of, the esoteric that, you can either find in the Bible or wasn't in the Bible. And they started talking about that.
Yep.
So, of course, it makes sense that a lot of stuff, like even hoodoo, hoodoo or voodoo.
Yep. I was about ready to say.
Uses the Bible as a spell book.
Yep.
And other things. So, I mean, there are a lot of esoteric stuff that's come out of that, and people forget. They're like, the Bible is sanctity, and I'm like, yeah, in a way, but as an author, I wished I had written the Bible, because that's on the best-selling list since time immemorial, but it's also changed. It's like everybody that like cites they live by the Bible, I'm like, get rid of your car, get rid of your phone, get rid of your computer, because that's all not in that Bible.
Yeah.
It's this weird duality that we have today, and some people, they don't want to go deeper to reconcile it, whereas like it seems like the Peruvians that you learn from have got this nice blend of the stuff they were forced into. However, they take what works for them and they blend it into their past traditions to kind of, I don't want to say modernize it, but in a way it is. It's changed over the years.
Oh, it definitely.
It's still living. That's what it is. It's still living.
It's alive. And that's, so about high school age, I remember my parents were heavy church going people, of course. But they actually had a cool pastor for a while. I remember this one sermon he said, and this actually got him in trouble. And I think the church eventually kicked him out, because he was starting to open up the congregation to the gays of the community and stuff, which is just shocking. But he had said, if you believe the same thing now that you do 5 years ago, or even 5 years before that, you might as well be dead. Like, and the whole congregation stopped cold, and I was like sitting up in my seat going, really?
Tell me more.
But that always stuck with me, and I knew I found my right teacher and my esoteric path when I got into the shamanic lineage I was a part of, because he basically told me the same thing, and said that like this lineage is that's what this lineage and what these types of shamanic lineages of Kirindismo are all about. They realized a long time ago, and not because it was just because they're so enlightened or whatever, it was a survival mechanism. In order to survive, we had to adapt and change, but we still have to keep doing that. And so there are lineages out there that still are trying to hold on to how things were 100 years ago or 100 years before that, and there's this hard resistance there that causes a lot of suffering. And then there are these other traditions that are just, we got to modernize. It's like we keep the heart and we keep the soul of our relationship with Mother Earth and the spirits, but we have to adapt and grow. And like it's like they've always related it to like, Christmas tradition or whatever. Like my parents pass on Christmas traditions to me. I still celebrate it because they celebrate it, but I make it my own. And I expect my kids to make it their own. And that's the way the using the mesa of our tradition was taught to me. Like if I ever did anything the way that my teacher did it, like I would get reprimanded. Like, do it your way.
Well, there's something to be said about mimicry up front at first. Because that's how, in the States we learn as kids. Yep. We repeat the alphabet, A, B, and sing the songs, right? Yeah. So, but again, it's where when people are just, they do that and they stop and they don't own it. That to me, that's the power of belief. That's the power of, what we do, or what separates like, shamanic paths. And, to me, I call the bubble, it's paganism. There's shamanic path. There's all the different little, witchcraft religions.
I agree.
I consider myself agnostic, and not agnostic in the fact that I do have goddesses and matrons and other, pantheons that I work with. But, everybody's got their own little bubble inside of that. And, the thing that I like about what we do as pagans is that we turn material into our own, which is it's a big thing in my book. I tell people right out of the front, learn, try it my way. And if it doesn't work, do it your own way. And then tell me about it, because I want to know, I want to see how you've pushed, because I look at what we do as authors or even educators of our, belief and heart paths as, we give experience, we give our perception, and then we say, run with it, see it, again, I have many books that talk about tarot meanings and stuff, and I, have my own digital collection of all that stuff. Hell, I've written 20 books on tarot, and I'm always finding a new, this image contains what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
I didn't think about that being in this card. Or kids. Like, it's okay to get your kids into tarot. Teresa Reed created an amazing deck called Tarot for Kids. They're oversized cards, so they're fun. You could do like the Go Fish shuffling method, which is still acceptable.
Yeah.
And they just tell stories. It's amazing what kids say about these cards when you put it in front of them.
That's awesome.
It's brilliant. But yeah, make this, make your path your own. It's like I use a blend of numerology, Kabbalah, and like storytelling when I talk about the cards. But in my private practice, where I, you see me for $150 for an hour, you do a lot of the talking. I just show the cards, and then we kind of weave what's going on around, and I send you away with homework.
Yep.
And then after 2 weeks, I allow you to make another session if you want. Everybody's got that unique one-to-one, one where it's the relationship of you to deity, whoever you believe is out there.
I think that homework aspect is really important, because I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who've had a session with me, and they think they're going to get the answer right then and there, and they can walk away going into the world like, oh, I'm not giving you shit. Like, you have to figure it out for you. Like, I'm here to facilitate and help be your buddy and help you navigate. but if you're not walking away with a list of things to do, then something's wrong.
I agree. I mean, we talk, as we were talking about, you never having done a fortune telling reading or something, usually in tarot, we see, where's the money, or, money questions, where's my soulmate, aka relationship questions. Those take up probably the majority of the pie. And then, my realm was in that other, which is kind of like the deeper stuff in a way. But, money and love are the top two things most people come. Yep. And yeah, they do expect, when they come to us, give me an answer. They do want either a question answered or something. In some cases, I'll I'll ask if we can, change the question in a way. Some people won't, but it's like, I'm not telling you what to do. The cards, tell you what to do in a way, but I'm an interpreter of them and I might be wrong.
Right.
And sometimes like I said, I know all these dictionary definitions. I've written, deck books, and yet sometimes in a reading, I'll go blank because I don't know how this card relates. I can weave you the story of X cards, but when I get a wall up there, I'm like, here's what this card means. But I can't see how it relates back.
Well,
and in that case,
there's 78 cards.
Yeah.
But somebody do the math. Imagine all the relationships that come into play from the different spreads and the way all the cards interrelate with each other. Like, so I normally will do 3-card spreads. Like, how many different combinations in that? That's, it's insane. So
that's more math than I want to do.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then imagine like larger spreads like that, like the Celtic Cross, whatever. So for me, these memorized definitions or whatever actually don't do a ton for me, because every time I lay out a spread, it's a whole new thing. It's and that's the way all ceremony is with me anyway. I mean, I've learned protocols and I've learned things in my training, but like every time you engage in ceremony, it's like a whole different experience.
It is, because it's personal, it's personal to you. I mean, the way I look at it, if how magic of reading works. Well, you came to me on this day at this time with these stars in alignment and these cards came out. Now, if you came to me a second from, now, or a second back then, it'd probably be different because things are changing.
Yeah.
Or, and sometimes you get the same cards and then okay, I really need to do this. But yeah, I get a lot of, I used to get a lot of people in those days where I, blah, 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 to their question 2 weeks or a month later. Hey, Jaymi, remember that reading you gave me? No, because it's not my reading to remember. So I changed it, and I found that when I stop talking and let them kind of, when you start talking in a reading where I'm just kind of taking notes and kind of helping you guide along, like you said, the ceremony, people are more invested. They see the connections where I can't make because, it's their journey.
Yeah.
And it's just this different way of doing it that, makes people want to be more invested in their life and do all the, the homework.
Yep. Agreed.
Here comes Lily again.
go.
Stretchy kitty. Yep, there we go. Oh, awesome. Stretchy beast. Whoop.
That's cool. We can use that as a chapter break here, because what I want to ask you, do you have a favorite deck? And if so, do you have a favorite deck that's like personal versus what you use for working, or both, or what's your jam?
Oh, what's my jam? Oh, I tend to gravitate towards darker decks,
Nice.
Just because of the goth, industrial path that I led.
Nice.
Most of my life I still kind of am in there.
Hell yeah.
Let's see here. My current favorite deck right now is the Trick or Treat Tarot by Barbara Moore and Jonathan Hunt, published by Llewellyn. Yes. It's got this storybook quality to it, and it's got a lot of pop culture reference in it that I love. And it's the Halloween dark deck that I've been wanting so I can read in public, because I think kids can relate to this as well as the adults.
Barbara Moore and Jonathan Hunt? Okay.
Yeah, it's a fun one. So that's what I'm currently jamming on.
All right.
However, the favorite deck that I've written for Lo Scarabeo is Tarot Z. It's a zombie deck. So there's, as far as I know, 2 zombie tarots. The first one is the zombie tarot, and it's kind of got this 50s housewives mid-century vibe to it. And that's fun. Whoop, I got lily fur all over the place here. It's
nice.
A fun deck, but it's not a zombie tarot to me. So I got asked to do the Tarot Z, and I created a whole world where you're in a survivor camp and the military guy with his guns hands you a tarot deck and says, read this. This will help you and save you if you have to go back out. And so it's kind of, I wrote fiction in there, and I went to some dark places, and the cards are dark and visceral, like you would expect to see in Walking Dead or some of the other, in a zombie genre. So really, I tried to cater it to the zombie fans that like I am. They also terrify me. They're the, because I have asthma and stuff. If a zombie horde ever came, it always worries me that I'm never going to be able to outrun them, either fast or slow. And they also translate into languages. So when I write for them, I have to do English text. I have to do the long English text, which is what we who speak English see. I do an English shorter text, and that's the one that gets translated into other languages. And for the Tarot Z, I did 78 zombie rules, a la Zombieland.
Wow.
So I also paid fan service to a lot of things. So that was my absolute favorite thing to do. And the card in that deck that I love is the Moon card. It's got this living, kind of maybe dead person, but she looks more alive to me, and she's playing the violin, standing on a pile of bones and dead bodies with this full moon shining light down. It's this really macabre but beautiful image that it sends shivers up my spine every time I talk about it.
I'm trying to find it right now.
Gotcha. It's powerful. What I use for my private practice is the This Might Hurt Tarot. It's one of two decks that are very similar. The Modern Witch Tarot. Yeah, the Modern Witch Tarot is the other one. They're pound for pound just about same. They have body diversity. They have gender diversity.
Oh, good.
They have some disabled folk in there, and of course, race, color in there. But for some reason, I gravitate towards the This Might Hurt deck over at the Modern Witch Tarot. And that's what I use because it's got really bright, vivid colors. It's more modern than the Smith-Waite deck. And it shows up good on my document camera, which is what I use in my Zoom readings.
Oh, so yeah, it's really nice. I love the illustrations in this.
It's fun. And like I said, the Modern Witch, you put them together, it's like looking almost at the same deck, but there are some illustrative differences. And for me, my sensibility goes to This Might Hurt. Let's see here. Overall favorite, I guess. What are my all-time favorites? The Vertigo Tarot, because it's
For real? That's my favorite deck. That's what I was going to talk to you about.
Yes, you have the first edition. I have the first edition and the third edition.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is my go-to. It's always been my go. I've tried so many. I have a ton of tarot decks, but this deck is the best. I love it so much. It's
amazing. Like I bought the first edition in 2000, right? I spent like $130 on it. And I didn't want to use it because it was out of print at that point. And I didn't want to screw the cards up, blah, 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 right? And I tried to find other decks, but every time I just go back to the Vertigo, and my instructor at that point was like, why are you ignoring it? It's talking to you. And so I started using it. And then the second edition came out, which I had, and then I gave that to a friend. And then the third edition came out. So, I was able to use it. I got Rachel to sign my Vertigo, my first edition book. I need to get Neil to sign it if I ever get to see him again.
Wow.
But yeah, the Vertigo has been one that I love. Like you said, it's dark, it's beautiful. For comic book lovers of the DC Vertigo line, it's perfect for you.
It's my most favorite line of comics ever, and it's like I could live in that I do live in that cosmology because I'm like living it almost every day.
Yeah, I mean, like Hellraiser. I mean, they've got John Constantine. I believe, if I remember, he's the Fool, right?
Yep,
or the Magician.
He's the Fool.
And that's just perfect. It's perfect for him. He's just and just I call it the Sandman Tarot just because I love Sandman, and having death is death.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Sandman's the Hierophant. I mean, it's just perfect.
Yeah, it's a good one. And again, I know that, for those that are listening, I know that we're talking a lot of Gen X stuff, but of course, I haven't seen the Sandman series yet on Netflix. Only
really?
because I've been busy. I was busy with putting on the Northwest Tarot Symposium, so that ate all my attention. But that's something I want to rectify soon. But yeah, the books are brilliant. The show I've heard is, bar none, a really good adaptation. And I'm just like, don't tell me. The Deviant Moon is another favorite of mine.
I love it too. That's awesome.
Because again, it's a dark deck, but what I love that Patrick did to it was the way he's been drawing those images since he was a kid. These weird moon, sun critters. And then he used to go, back when you could go to graveyards and do rubbings of stuff and textures. He'd take photos of the different textures on tombstones or rubbings and apply that to the various, skins on the critters' bodies. And it's blunt. It is a very blunt deck. It's also good for this time of year around, we're doing this around Samhain/Halloween. And he also just released a book, this really thick, nice, girthy book that goes into the deck and everything. And it's just amazing.
I need to check that
US
out.
US Games has that book.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, those two are favorites. I'm getting more
so
into...
awesome. Those are my top two favorites as well. Yeah, Deviant Moon reminds me if Terry Gilliam made a tarot deck, like that's why it drew me so much, because Terry Gilliam is like one of my most favorite artists alive, ever.
I can see that. Terry Gilliam movies. Yeah. Ooh, talk about the trippy shit.
Yeah.
So good. I've also been getting into like some of these bags that you might see behind me. These bigger bags down here have tarot tiles, mostly by my friend Jaymi Sawyer. She does her own decks, but she'll make little wood tiles or plastic things from them. Let me grab one of the bags here.
Yeah.
All right, I think this one contains... She made me... I was fortunate enough to make my own deck in 2017 with Lo Scarabeo called the Triple Goddess Tarot. They gave me the title. They told me what we want. It took me 5 months to get the Triple Goddess ladies to talk to me because... Lilith is my matron. So I was finally able to get them. But Jaymi made me a set of tarot tiles.
Wow.
So she takes the images, scans them in, makes them stickers, and then puts really good resin around them. And then she's got burners.
Nice.
And so this is the Two of Swords. But if you want to get to know me deck-wise, sure, this is my first deck, and it's not what I would consider my favorite because there are things I'd like to change, as all good authors and creators do.
Yeah.
But this, Wald Amberstone of the Tarot School pulled 3 cards on it. He goes, I can tell, I know more about you looking at this deck than anything. And I was just like, shut up, But yeah, there's, when you do decks and you create them, there's a little bit of you into everything. Like you were saying, like you can tell where I come, like in the Starman, book, you saw where I came in and where I wasn't. And so it's like, when you're creating a deck, a lot of you goes into it, whether you're drawing or doing the direction.
Wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit with you.
Totally.
So to be perfectly honest, I haven't picked up Triple Goddess Tarot.
That's fine. You don't have to.
But no, I actually do want to. I have like a whole list of decks that are on my list of decks to get. And it's on that list, and it has been for a while. And I wanted to ask you about the creation of it, because when in my training of Kabbalah, what I was taught was like the ultimate initiation, the ultimate initiatory path is creating your own deck. And it's on my bucket list of things to do, but there's something about me that's almost scared to do it, which means I should totally do it. But kind of wanted to find out what that experience was like for you as an initiation, if it was, or if it was just like what did it do to you and for you?
Oh God, a lot of things. So of course, I've been wanting to write books all my life, and I have been published both fiction and nonfiction, with articles from other books, right? So Tarot Inspired Life You know, like when you're in an anthology or, you know, comics, sometimes you can blame the other person, you know, like if something bombs, right? But when you write your own book, you know, I have to own this one, right? So I could say, oh, that one didn't sell much because, you know, this person as a joke. But yeah, I've been wanting to do my own stuff. And so Tarot Inspired Life was a dream come true. And in a way, it's weird because I never expected I would be writing metaphysical, esoteric tarot stuff. You know, I thought back in college, I wanted to be a poet. But then I found sudden fiction and writing, you know, less than 2,000 words, you know, making postcards or making tile stuff. And that philosophy's gone into decks, I think, because there are two different ways you do decks, or, you know, you can come to deck creation, or three, I guess. You can either be an illustrator and you can draw them all. And then if you're also a writer, you can write the book for it, right? So you can be the all-in-one kind of package. For those of us like me who can't, you know, draw, I mean, I could release a stick figure thing, but, you know, there are many other ones out there. The way I did it was, number one, they said, and this was after I think 5 or 6 decks. My editor, Ricardo, came to me and said, okay, now that you've done, you know, all these books for us, we want you to come up with a design for a deck. And it's going to be around this idea of the triple goddess, right? And I said, okay. And then I felt like literally, like, you know, here's the cartoon image, you know, for Daniel to draw. I was being picked up by the hand of my editor and being dropped not into the shallow end, but the deep end of the pool, and me going, yay! As I'm slowly kind of like, you know, how the fuck am I going to pull this off? Yeah, kind of like Terminator in a way as well. So I had no idea how to really do this. You know, it's like you said, it's terrifying. You're like, I've got to do this. And with Los Scarabeo, they want it fast, fast, fast. And when you write for them as a staff writer, they give you a project name, they give you the images sometimes, or they give you, you know, some ideas. So you kind of have a world in mind, or they let you create the world. And so, you know, but they tell you a character count. So they work in character counts, not words. So, but it's usually like a standard small booklet, like the one in the Triple Goddess. And I point up here because they put Triple Goddess cards on my cover, was about 8 pages, 8.5 by 11, US standard page size. And so, you know, when you're writing, you can hammer that out pretty quick, and then you edit it and send it in, and voila, you are an author of a tarot deck. But when you're designing and you have an artist waiting for your input, it's harder, because you're like, you know, how do I make sense of this? You know, and at the beginning, it was like I was trying to give them, I had a Pinterest board of ideas of clothing and stuff. I wanted to make it more urban fantasy because that's my genre. That's what I love. And my core, right? And I worked with an Italian artist, so there was the language transit. I mean, even though Ricardo and Franco, who did the art, were, you know, good in English, there were still ideas lost in translation. So, yep. And that was my wife. She had to go away. She has background. But, you know, there was some stuff lost. So I said, okay, we're just going to do this. And, you know, like I said earlier, I had no idea what to do for that, because I am, as far as, you know, pantheons, I'm agnostic, where there are so many cultures that have a triple goddess or a triple deity, you know, influence, that It's like, I am not Celtic. My matron's Lilith, you know, and Lilith to me is it's more pop culture. It's my image of her, not Babylonian, not the Judaism pre-Eve version. Right. It's the self-made goddess that she is, because she's risen up through things, you know, as an empowering, you know, to me, she's the goddess of empowerment. And, you know, and also a defender of those that have been thrown away, like adoptions, or, you know, the homeless, you know, that sort of thing. That's how I came to know her. So she's been mine. And I asked her to go talk to the ladies. That's what I said. Can you go talk to the triple goddess, you know, the maiden mother crown, and have them give me instruction on what they want to see in a tarot deck that's called triple goddess. It took me 5 months. And then one night as I was going to bed, I started getting the ideas, the storyline for the maiden mother crown majors, where the first line is all maiden and the second line, the second 7, agnostic of the fool, was, you know, the mother, and the third is the crone. And then I was able to kind of, when I got some of those images, I was able to kind of type them out as like stage directions. Kind of like, I mean, I've never done comic book stuff or worked with an illustrator on comics, but I imagine this is probably what I would see. You know, you do like a small paragraph that says angle coming here, you know, light here, or, you know, person sitting this, you know, kind of loose ideas. But I kind of kept it open as well for Franco to have some fun with it. Like on the page of cups, you know, where it's usually a cup and a child or somebody holding it, and there's a critter in it. So I said, give me a critter, go wild. So I got this whole octopus dude, you know, and I love that because I let Franco do it. But that's kind of how it went. And then I had to learn, at least in Los Scarabeo terms, that if the image isn't what you want, try and repurpose it for something else. So like the devil card, at first it was supposed to be like an old lady kind of pulling her hair out like this, just kind of like, you know, like I'm not happy. I didn't like that. It didn't give me a devil, you know, didn't give me that idea of, you know, letting go or release that I wanted. So we put that as the 5 of Pentacles because that fit a little better. And then I came up with this idea because the crone is also, you know, the crone is that 15th card, you know, you got to introduce her. And I was like, the best way I did it was she's walking away from a house that have people in it. You know, there's a fire and it like stripping, you know, naked. She's taking everything off. She's letting go because she was a mother. And now that her child has children, she's free to go on and, you know, continue on the path of the fool's journey, which is a whole nother, you can call it esotericism in the tarot that has, but that's a whole nother like system that the majors have in it. And so that became a more pretty one. But yeah, it was back and forth for months, you know, yes, try this. And then when I got one of the knights, it had the Knight of Wands had a sword, and I went, "Oops, we need to change that." So he just, you know, made a wand, made the sword into a wand. I'm like, perfect, done, ship it. And then, you know, while he's, you know, your artist is doing all that, you know, as me as the writer, I was taking what I had written and turning that into the booklet notes. Which for me, usually, if you follow a lot of what I do in those smaller booklets, it's I try and give a description of the image. And these days, because I'm all about trying to remove the binaries out of tarot, because I don't see the world as binary.
Right.
I try and describe the people in it as figures, as people, rather than this girl is doing this or this boy is doing that, because you never know who's going to, you know, enter into this. Yeah. So I try to give them an entry point that either gives a description of it or a little story snippet before I give here are the keywords for it, you know, like love, deflection, or, you know, etc.
Right.
And stuff. I mean, it's fun. It's challenging to write those little tiny books because you are so limited to space. And diction, aka word choice, matters.
Yeah.
So I've got a good vocabulary. And every time I write for like Los Scarabeo, I go back to a master doc. I copy everything over. So it's just cool to kind of see what I've done before and how it's added. And then, of course, that becomes a template for whatever project's next. And I can, you know, add in the layers and stuff. But that's how I did this deck. Was, again, it was fear. It was kind of fear driven. It was, I have to do this. And somehow I just, you know, doggy paddled and made my way to the shore and figured out the path. But it's different for everyone. Like with Llewellyn, if you publish with Llewellyn, and this is only because Daniel and I are both Llewellyn authors, so because Barbara Moore is my editor and she's the acquisitions person for All Tarot, I know this process. They want a huge proposal. They pretty much want you to have everything written for each card, and then maybe like 3 or 4, you know, card descriptions. They like to partner you up with a illustrator. Or if you're an illustrator and you're not, you know, like Daniel, who can also write, they'll probably partner you up with an author too. But usually it's the proposal first, and they really do kind of want you to write the 30,000 to 50,000 words that they do in their full cover new books and stuff first before they, you know, pick you up. And then it can be a year or 2 process. this as your illustrator goes through and designs everything. Like the one I'm looking forward to for Llewellyn is you can kind of see owls.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My friend Pamela Chen is doing an owl tarot, and I'm like, gimme.
Ooh,
so
nice.
Trying to get Marcus will hook me up, I know. But yeah, it's there are different processes depending on who you go with, and people will be there to help out. Like I wasn't big on cheerleaders or cheerleading as a teen, but now I'm the biggest cheerleader of everything. Be careful what you tease, kids, because you might become what you tease. Case in point, me cheerleading. But yeah, I mean, I'm all about helping people achieve their writing goals or their creative visions, because I feel that in some esoteric circles they want to hide things. They're like, this is mine, this is the secret, the arcana, if you will. Arcana means secret,
right?
And in a lot of esoteric circles, they're closed practices, meaning if you're allowed into it, you can't talk about it, or you can't, you can talk generically, but you can't share those secrets. I'm of the type, especially now that we have 8 billion people on this planet, where there's enough information that we should be sharing. There's enough differences, enough individuality that it's good. I guess you can say I'm more socialism these days, where we are a web, we are a network. And I feel like we have to help each other out in order to survive.
Interdependent.
Interdependence, which is something I do talk about in the book as well.
Yeah.
And people forget, like, the United States is very still independent. We are still mine and mine only. And I think the struggle we're having, not to get too political, is that there are those of us that are like, no, we can't. I mean, yes, you can be you can be independent, you can be dependent, but we have to be interdependent. We have to take care of each other. We have, as people, as a culture, and there's that struggle between those that are like, no, and those of us that are like, this is the next evolution. And so we've got this tension where, the old guard wants to hold on to certain things.
Right. No, I agree wholeheartedly. So, yeah, I mean, someday I would like to tackle that. Someday I would like to tackle my own tarot deck.
You can, I would love to see that. The world, aka me, wants that deck. The world needs your books.
We'll see. I've had a few different ideas. I actually had an idea that was going to be specific to the shamanic lineage of mine, and then I was like, I'm not sure if there's way too many people. I didn't want to. I guess you could maybe consider it cultural appropriation, whatever. There's plenty of people that would have been cool with me doing that, but there are some people that I think they would have felt iffy about it in those lineages, and so I don't want to get into any kind of weird political thing. And
I get it. Like Andrew McGregor did that with his tarot for the Orisha deck, where he got the blessings of his grandfathers and stuff for the his tradition, and made this beautiful deck. But a lot of people got upset, or some people got upset about it because it's a white guy doing a predominantly black person's belief structure. Yeah and it's hard to be that. I'm not too concerned about that aspect. It's just if there's some people that just aren't cool with it, I'm just not gonna do it, because it's not important to me. I don't want to own anything. It's about me being able to share something with the world, and I don't want it to cause hardship. I get that. I mean, but there's something to be said about creating a personalized deck. Like Annabelle, she created the Spirit Keepers Tarot. The first edition was for herself. I've got that copy. It's black and white, at true black, true white, ink drawings that she drew. And it's that deck that I'm like, if you want to know Annabelle, use that deck.
Yeah.
Because that's her personal deck. That's the, world according to her. But people, were like, we want this deck. So she published it. But it really is that deck where if you want to know your friend, do that. The second edition, which was the Vitruvian, which is more of a brown color. I can't remember the term. There's a term for that where it's like
the sepia.
Sepia. It's the sepia tone. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I went my brain. It's a sepia tone, and that was her first attempt at making this her vision of what she believes more public. But it really took this third edition, which is full color, and it does incorporate all the world's cultures into it to really make, a deck that can be, for me, usable to the public rather than that private one. So you can, I'm talking to you, Daniel, and everybody else, if you want to make a deck just for yourself that shows your worldview, your belief structure, and all that, you can.
Yeah.
And that's also something fun to do, because it'll get you showing you that you can do a deck, and then your second deck or your third deck or fourth, etc., ad nauseum, that can be public stuff.
Yeah. I definitely have that on the horizon. For me, I make everything this huge, like, ceremonial process, and I know it's going to be this, like, giant, like, spiritual development for me. So we'll see. So what's coming up on the horizon for Jaymi Elford? Anything we can look forward to? Any publications you can talk about that might be coming out soon?
Yeah. So let's see here. I did a deck for Los Scarabeo a couple of months ago that is called the Art Nouveau, or the Steampunk Art Nouveau Tarot. Ooh. That should be out. So we're recording this mid October. That should be out either now-ish on their site that you can pre-order on the Welland site. But it's coming out November 8 officially. And it's Art Nouveau style, Art Deco images of steampunk things. So I wrote that with a storytelling steampunk world in mind. I created, the intro is from like a captain of an airship. Here's this present, here's some characters from this world. I gave the world a name, et cetera, et cetera.
That's awesome.
Made little stories for it. That's coming out. I did another kind of a meditative oracle deck for the Muka Oracle that's coming out later next year. And sometimes you'll see my names on things that I've done, and sometimes you won't, depending on, their marketing, or they're like, this isn't going to be a good deck or something. So there's decks out there that I've done that I have on my publications list that don't have my name for whatever reason. Like the Way of the Panda doesn't have, or the Panda Tarot doesn't have my name on it.
Oh, that sucks.
I'm like, why not? But again, it's a deck about pandas, according to them. So, sometimes they'll put your name on it, sometimes they won't. So that Muka Oracle is coming out next year, and I don't know if it's how much of my system and design, because with oracles, I feel like you have to design a system in order for it to work. And the way they designed the images made it more of a contemplative meditation deck, and that's how I wrote the booklet. So I don't know if they went with what I got, or if they did, have a different staff writer work on it. And so I'm curious. And again, that happens. They asked me to do another deck. I can't remember it's an Egyptian style thing. So I should be getting some more information sometime this week to start writing it. I'm taking some time off. It's, like I said, it's October, and the fallow season, the winter months, that time to go within. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of things in my mind that I want to clear, a lot of things kind of that quote unquote post-pandemic that I need to sort out. And while, I'm still taking readings, I'm not really promoting myself as that, because I want to take this time to right-size things in my life, whether it's my home, my tarot deck collection, my mind, and everything. So I feel like I've plateaued, and I'm like the fool that has this wall right here. They want to jump off, and I'm not sure where to go. Yeah. I do have 2 more book ideas in my head. I have 1 deck idea in my head. But I need to talk to Barb. I need her mentoring for how I could become, because I want to publish more with Llewellyn or other publishers. Mm-hmm. I do also work on. I'm the associate editor, as we like to jokingly call him, the AST, ASS.ed, the ASS Ed, for the Cartomancer magazine, which is it's a metaphysical journal for diviners. So we don't just talk about tarot, we talk Lenormand, we talk oracle. And for those of you that are familiar with journals from like the doctor profession, the engineering professions, they've got all these, inner, journal magazines. The Cartomancer magazine is ours. That's what we, bill it as, where these are full color, beautiful magazines that talk techniques, share spreads, share reviews, of old books and new. And it's something that we can come to again and again to learn more. And so, I write for it. I get new articles for it, new information. And so I want to focus on that a little bit more and promote it more. I'm also 1/3 of Card Slingers Coast to Coast, which is a podcast between me, Melissa Sanova, and upcoming author. Her book's going to be released next month, Hillary Perry Haggerty, and we talk tarot. And I'm the West Coast rep, Hillary's the East Coast rep, and Melissa's the Midwest. So you can kind of, the idea when we started it was, to get this idea behind the differences, and you can kind of tell West Coast, East Coast, Mid Coast, but we also talk the profession, we talk what not to do to your readers. We talk about the cards on occasion and all that, and it's just fun.
Awesome.
And it does have cussing. We are swear bears, so it's like coming into our living room and laughing, and mom jokes on occasion, or air horns. Melissa went through an air horn period where all she wanted to do was say stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that's coming out. I mean, I don't think I'll ever stop wanting to write or publish, because that's
it's in our blood. It's in our blood. There
My
we
other
go.
little buddy, that's Jazz Bug. He's the other half of the kittens that we adopted over last June. But yeah, there's good stuff, and I love talking tarot or anything else that's going on, and I love supporting others. So
shadesofmaybe.com is your website.
Shadesofmaybe.com is my writing site, so that's got all my publications. InnerCompassTarot.com is where you can book a reading with me, or just kind of see other stuff, and eventually, more kitty tales. At my deck site up there, I want to put like mini reviews of what decks I own and all that. Okay. And then TarotInspiredLife.com is companion book site. It's got downloads and articles and stuff about everything.
Awesome.
And other than that, thank you so much for this. This was great.
Thank you. I will have the links to your social medias in the description, of course. So everybody go out and find Jaymi and support her. She does excellent work, and as you can tell, she's obviously majorly authentic, which is really nice to have in these communities. So thanks a lot for your time. Really appreciate it. This was a blast. Let's do it again sometime.
Heck yeah.
All right. Keep it psycho, everyone.